The warlord's voice carried like a blade dragged across stone, each syllable polished on cruelty. "They send their soft soldiers," he said, lounging across the ribbed throne grown from blackened chitin. "The humans, the world cuddlers, the grief feeders, they paint their armor with names rather than victories." His court of officers laughed with the serrated chatter of the Threx, an apex race from the Scour Nebula who believed mercy was a species-level weakness. They were thick-bodied, patient, tireless in siege, and unblinking in void. They called their central world Khar-Vel, which in their language meant the anger that eats. From the upper galleries of the throne hall, banners hung like flayed shadows. Beneath them stood prisoners, Meridians, Vaul, Twicefold Zun, thin and gray with fear. The Threx made a ceremony of disdain. In their creed, respect was fed only by terror. A holoslate glowed before the warlord, its light carving cruel planes across his exoskeletal face. On that slate spun a sigil he had learned to hate, a blue arc over a pale sphere, the mark of the Terran Union. "Their fleet approaches," croaked General Skrez, second mandible twitching with habit. "9 carriers, a spine of escorts. They broadcast warnings, human warnings." "Warnings for whom?" he purred. "For children." "For us," the general said, with the faintest tremor. "They request corridors for evacuation of non-combatants." Laughter again, louder this time. The Threx loved to list the civility protocols of Earth. No strike on hospitals, no fire on surrender beacons, no waste of life when it could be spared. They loved these stories because they believed that compassion unarms. "Signal them," the warlord said. He plucked a shard of obsidian fruit from a bowl and crushed it between his teeth, letting its dark juice run over his tongue. "Tell them Khar-Vel has no non-combatants. Tell them our nurseries are factories and our hospitals are armories. Tell them we will eat their warnings and spit them back as fire." He dismissed the general with an idle flex of his claw. Then he tapped the holoslate and watched the human fleet swell larger in the orbital projections, those pale, sleek ships like bones polished by river water. They were beautiful, he admitted in a private place inside his skull that he never let into his voice. "Soft soldiers," he said again, savoring the words. "Let us break them and prove the galaxy's oldest law." Above Khar-Vel, the human fleet came in on silent burns and restrained signatures, a ballet of restraint. They could have decloaked with thunder. They could have salted the orbital lanes with mines and called it justice. Instead, they broadcast again, voice steady, translation crystal smooth. "This is Admiral Imani Cade of the Terran Union. We have secured safe zones on your moons. Evacuations will begin in 6 hours. No fire will be exchanged in evacuation lanes. Do not target the lanes." "Soft," murmured the Threx. Cade's ships turned at the last minute, painting the sky with contrails and friction halos. They slid past the planet's defense guns and into high anchor positions with impossible grace, as though they'd rehearsed this dance 100 times. Maybe they had. Humans were good at practice. In the dark below, on the ash-cracked surface of Khar-Vel, a city awoke to sirens and the thunder of Threx mobilization. Soldiers in segmented armor marched in ranks, their steps shaking the white ash into plumes. Railgun mechs unfolded from bunkers like mantis blossoms. The defense choir took their place on the citadel's spires and began to sing the frequencies that jammed enemy comms, making the air throb with dread. In the human fleet, aboard the carrier TUS Asterion, a marine named Nia Rozek cinched the strops of her drop seat and whispered the same prayer she whispered before every fall. "Let me do more good than harm." She looked across the narrow aisle at her fire team. Soto grinned with the lopsided calm of someone who'd made his peace with gravity. Hernandez checked a medkit for the 4th time. Kadir, their engineer, slept like a stone amid the thrum, a sleep so complete it felt like defiance of physics. Above them, the Admiral's voice flowed through every channel. "We are not here to break a world. We are here to end a hunger. The Threx believe fear is the most efficient engine. They do not understand what humans do when we are afraid for each other." The harness slammed open. The drop bay yawned. The planet rose like a darkened sun. They fell. The Threx had seeded Khar-Vel's atmosphere with glitter mines, dust-sized flechettes keyed to human thermal signatures. They had woven the air with webs of sonic disorientation. They had prepared with the careful patience of a spider. But the first human pods didn't punch through the defenses like teeth through flesh. They fanned out, breaking against the drag with wake discs, bled speed and high arcs, and deployed in patterns that looked like cowardice to Threx eyes. They didn't go for the citadel. They didn't go for the defense grid. They went for the power plants. Not to destroy them, to capture and stabilize them. "They want our lights," Skrez hissed, watching on a tactical table. "They want our heat. Are they afraid of the night?" "They are afraid of waste," the warlord said. He flicked the feeding bowl aside, bored. "Send hounds to the relay fields. Drive them into the open. Burn them until their shells melt." The hounds were thorn-armored skimmers with plasma mouths and a taste for screams. They streaked across the ash plains, fired by gunners with unblinking eyes. They found the first human team at Substation 9, where a line of tall pylons walked like metal giraffes to the horizon. They saw human soldiers in gray armor moving with infuriating calm, and they opened their mouths. The human line didn't scatter. It pivoted. Kadir stepped forward and drove a spike into the ground, fingers working the interface like a musician tuning an old instrument. A shimmering rose from the pitted earth, low, shimmering, heat mirage, and the hounds that ran through it staggered, their plasma mouths coughing, their engine stomachs choking on bad harmonics. "You can make plasma sing wrong?" Sato said, incredulous, even as he sighted and dropped the lead skimmer. "I can make it hum a lullaby," Kadir murmured and smiled without joy. The hounds broke around the distortion field, spilling to flank like a river around stone. The human line pivoted again. Nia planted her boots, felt the earth shiver through her soles. "Don't let them draw you," she said. And they did not break ranks even as the sky lit with Threx fire. They were soft, the Threx believed. Humans were soft. But the first lesson of Earthborn soldiers was this: softness properly used becomes the most resilient armor. Trees survive storms because they know how to bend. So the line bent, flexed, absorbed, and did not shatter. Across Khar-Vel it was the same. At water plants, at comm towers, at the magneto arrays that kept the planet's fragile field from collapsing into a storm of radiation. Human teams darted and braced, secured instead of raised, repaired in the midst of battle, stamped human warnings on control consoles in 6 languages and a 7th written with pictographs for the Threx who did not read. They marked corridors, they painted evacuation arrows, not for the Threx, who laughed at such things, but for the enslaved species pressed into the planet's assembly tiers. In the underaisles of factories, in the vented heat of rock hives, voices whispered in a dozen tongues. The humans made lanes, the humans left water. The humans said, "Do not run, walk, keep your family together." They are making an invasion into a rescue, Skrez spat, anger tinged with bewilderment. They will diffuse our fear. They will ruin the anger that eats. And when they are close, we will devour their soft hearts. His comms officer turned, pupils flaring wide. Lord, they are calling. The holoslate flickered, and a woman's face appeared, dark, tired, eyes steady, no helmet, no mask. The warlord could smell her sweat and oil through the weird fidelity of the feed. I'm Admiral Cade, she said, as if she were introducing herself at a dinner. We are not here to conquer your people. We are here to end the predation you have built on this world. Allow evacuations to proceed without interference, and your soldiers may lay down arms and be treated. He spread his arms. We do not lay down, we devour. You will try, and you will lose, not because we are stronger, though we are stronger today, not because we are smarter, though we studied you. You will lose because while you measure your power in the screams you collect, we measure ours in the lives we pull back from the edge. We get more powerful the more we protect. He leaned forward, smiling. Soft words. They're all I need, she said. And the feed cut. He laughed until his throat clicked. Day bled into night beneath the ash clouds, and the ash clouds bled into a storm the Threx called the Bone Shaker. It came every few years, the planet's crooked magnetolines flexing, winds knife-cold pouring down from the dead pole, lightning like splitting granite. The Bone Shaker stripped roofs from compounds and tossed armored vehicles like playthings. The Threx loved the Bone Shaker. It meant the weak died and the strong sharpened. The humans were still on the planet when the storm rolled in. We hold, Nia said into the team channel, voice low. Lock the arrays. We turn the substation into a shelter. We're in a war zone, Hernandez said, slamming a riot gate into place with a grunt. We're in a war zone and a planetary storm. Yeah, Sato said, and my mother always wanted me to have a hobby. They opened the gates. They put out beacons. They switched their weapons to peacekeeping settings only long enough for the first group to rush in. Meridian miners stumbling, clutching babies wrapped in quilted foil, eyes blown wide. Then another wave, this time Vaol with their pale webbed hands. Then Threx. Not soldiers, no. The scrawny hive tenders who seldom saw the sun, who kept the feeding tanks full and the hatcheries warm. A Threx hive tender staggered under the weight of a tank of larvae, dropped to one knee at Nia's boots, mandibles trembling. Please, he said, in broken childish trade. Please, little bites. She didn't hesitate. She pulled the tank from him, heavy, sloshing, warmer than a human fever, and set it inside the shielding radius. Hernandez was there already, popping the seals with surgeon care, checking the larva's color against a field guide he'd jammed into his heads-up display hours ago. Let me do more good than harm, Nia murmured again. The storm hit, and the substation shook like a struck bell, and the Marines stood like moorings. Around the planet, human shelters glowed like hearths on the tactical map. Some were in power stations, some in water hubs, some in caves their engineers had cut in a hurry, with heat drills that hummed the wrong lullaby. They took in anyone who came. They turned away no one. They directed the unwounded to tasks, coil rope, wrap blankets, boil water in battered Threx canteens. The disciplines of emergency became a language more common than trade. The warlord watched the red dots, his strike teams, skitter and stalled before the little white circles that marked human shelters. He watched how his squads grew unpredictable when their families were inside those circles, how soldiers who would charge a machine gun's mouth without blinking would pause, would look over their shoulders, would seek, like heretics, a glimpse of the evacuation lanes. "You are making me interesting," he said, to the projection, to the human admiral watching the same maps from her ship. "You are teaching me about you. What do you do when we place our nurseries in armories, when we turn our hospitals into traps? Do you weep for the hypocrisy? Do you still hold your fire?" On the carrier, Admiral Cade leaned a hand on the rail. Her other hand rested on a mug gone cold. "We hold," she said to no one in particular. "Because if our rules are only rules when they're easy, then they're suggestions." "Admiral," a comms officer's voice, stilted with suppressed excitement, "we've got the choir." The choir, the Threx frequency weavers, their galaxy's ugly songs fluttering the air like moths of static. Human signals had cut through in strips and flares like sunlight through damaged blinds. "Put it through," Cade said. On-screen bloomed a visual of the Citadel's spires, lightning braiding around them like ropes from an angry god. The choir stood where they always did, plates flaring on their chests, throats swelling, song vibrating the storm itself. "Can you break it?" someone asked. Cade shook her head, eyes on the spires, mind 1,000 meters away. "Don't you feel it?" she said softly. "They're compensating for the storm. They're saving their own." "Even while we attack?" "They are many things," Cade said, "but they are a people. Their children sleep under those frequencies. If we silence the choir, we kill more than signals." "So what do we do?" "We sing back," she said. Within minutes, the human fleet unfolded antennae that human hands had polished only days ago, not expecting to use them like this. They broadcast, not jamming, not muzzling, but laying a counterline under the Threx song, a carrier wave tuned to stabilize. It was a risk. It meant their signals could be filtered and redirected, that their channels would be as accessible as a market square. "We're going to get hacked," the chief of Net Defense said, tired and frantic. "We are going to help them finish their storm. Then we are going to take their world from the inside out while they realize they exist as more than teeth." On the ground, the substation became a sanctuary. The bone shaker keened like dragon song. Kadir tied off a resoldered cable with sore fingers and leaned back against the humming tower. The Threx larva tank glowed faintly behind him, a jar full of lightning bugs. A Threx child, adolescent signaled by the pale crescents ringing his jaw, stood beside Nia, watching with solemn, unblinking eyes. "You fight strange," he said in perfectly clear trade. "We fight hard," she said. "You pulled a hive tendril out of the hound's mouths. You didn't kill him." "We did not." "Why?" She thought of a dozen human words that could fail here: justice, ethics, God. She thought of her father sitting on a porch with a cup of coffee, waiting for the sun to get its act together. She thought of Kadir, who could make plasma hum lullabies. She thought of Hernandez, who stitched holes in enemies. "Because," she said, picking the simplest tool in the kit, "we aren't done with each other. Not yet. Maybe not ever." The boy's pupils narrowed. "You plan to keep us." "To keep you alive," she said. "To keep you from eating yourselves. In some sense, yes." He turned that over. In his culture, keeping meant owning. In hers, it meant holding without harm. The storm shouted over their small logic. Will you take our world?" he asked, finally, mandibles twitching in some ancestral fear. Nia looked down at him, his dark plates scuffed and bent, his hands clenched. She squatted to be level with his eyes. "We will take your world away from those who use it to break others," she said carefully. "We will take away the anger that eats, and we will give it back." "To who?" "To you," she said, and pointed to the evac lane chalked on the substation floor, where Meridians and Vale stood side by side, forming a list, trading blankets in awkward quiet. "Maybe to you together." The boy's pupils opened and closed, confused and perhaps a tiny bit relieved. The storm made decisions for them then. The tower groaned, the whole world jolted. Kadir swore and told her to brace. And then, somewhere far above them, where the choir sang and the admiral sang back, the worst of the bone shaker broke. When the storm moved on, it left the air scrubbed clean of ash. It left the sky raw blue in patches the Threx had not seen in decades. It left a silence the warlord found stranger than any human tactic. His officers stood at a respectful distance. He could smell Shkrez's fear like old copper. The tactical map had changed. Human white circles had merged. Their lines had thickened, not through conquest, but cohesion. The evac lanes glowed like rivers on a night map, and his own red dots had learned to flow around them as if by instinct. What had gotten into his soldiers, into the servants, the slaves, the workers? Hope had, he realized, with a disgust that surprised him by including envy.
"They will come for the citadel," Shkrez said. "We can hold if we cut the evac lanes, if we make them decide between their softness and victory." The warlord lifted his hands and studied the light sliding across his claws. The humans sang through the storm with us, he thought. They matched our choir not to silence it, but to save our young. They are either very foolish, or they know their strength so well they can effort it on others. "Let them come," he said. "I want to see how they take a world. They'll bomb the spires," Shkrez muttered. "They'll cut the throat." "They won't," the warlord said, and let satisfaction curl his mouth, "because we put the nurseries beneath them." He was right. The human fleet did not fire on the spires. They did not march in the big, satisfying way that Threx liked to paint. They did not demand parades of surrender. They came under the city. Kadir bided a burrowing rover like an old friend through the basalt tubes that fed the citadel's foundations. Nia rode above, head brushing the ceiling as the rover hummed. Sato walked behind, squinting into heat haze, mind counting distances like a ritual. Hernandez carried a pack that clinked softly, medkits, food ration tubes, bandage rolls, a small patch that simply read, "Humanity is helping," a joke he'd stitched for himself and no one else. They advanced beneath the throne. Their maps were compiled from old Viol sewer schematics, meridian maps made in the dark, Zun memory of airflows. Humans were good at assembling stories into routes. That was part of their power. They made things from things. The tunnel opened at last into a chamber grown from slick resin. It smelled like sweet rot in a forest. Above, through a lattice, they saw a glow. "The nursery," Hernandez said, voice gone quiet. "We're directly beneath the spires," Kadir said, pointing at the faint resonance shimmering through the lattice. "The choir's vibrations keep the nursery lava in rhythm. If we disrupt that, they die in minutes." "So we don't," Nia said. "We do the opposite." "The opposite of war," Sato said. "Good thing we brought one." They set to work. Kadir tuned the rover's emitters to reinforce the choir frequencies, building a subfloor that stiffened the rhythm like a bass line under a fragile melody. Hernandez moved among the brood tanks, eyes sharp for adhesion failures, for signs of stress. Nia posted Sato and two Viol who had slipped from their overseers to help, quick, quiet, wary as feral cats at the 4 points of entry. They all listened, every ear on the line between helpful and harm. Above them, the warlord moved his officers like pieces on a board. He ordered flanking strikes on the human shelters. He ordered drones into the evac lanes just close enough to panic but not strike. He tried to find the spaces where the soft ones would bleed. And the soft ones did bleed. Human casualties ticked upward in quiet numbers. Names wrote themselves in the computer on Cade's desk. She closed her eyes now and then and whispered one aloud. Pritchard, she would say, as if that person had just entered the room. Makala, Joanne. This was a superstition, she told herself. It made no difference, but softness tended to grow traditions like that around it. At last, the warlord could not abide the slowness. He rose. He descended through his citadel's throat to the nursery chamber, with a bodyguard like a forest of knives. He stepped into a silence he did not expect. No alarms, no sirens, only the hum of the brood, steady and safe. The stink of resin, the warmth, the unbearably intimate warmth of a place meant to keep small lives from the cold. And there, standing unarmored, with her hands open, was a human.
She had eyes the color of rainwater and a scar along her jaw like a comet's path. Behind her, a robot hummed softly and did not point its tools at anyone. At her flanks stood a small squad. Beyond them, 2 Veol kept their hands visible. A medic with a patch that said, "Humanity is helping," watched a gauge and did not freeze when a door behind him whispered open. The warlord froze instead. "Hello," the human said. Her voice was tired in the way long kindness becomes, threadbare but whole. "I'm Sergeant Nia Rozek. We're here to keep this room warm." He bared his teeth. "And when it is warm, we'll ask you to surrender." He laughed once. It was not one of his theater laughs. It was short and free of artifice, and shocked him with its own honesty. "Do you know where you are?" he asked. "Do you see the ceiling above your delicate skull? If I let my choir miss a beat—" "You'll kill children," she said. "Yes, that's always been the choice here, hasn't it? For you. Kill to frighten. Kill to demonstrate. Kill to maintain. We're offering you another choice." "You offer me choice in my own home." "In your own home," she agreed. "Because we want to live here, in a galaxy where you existed and chose differently." He wanted to tear her in half. He wanted to step forward and feel bone give. He wanted to be the anger that eats. He wanted, dimly, to be tired of that. "What happens if I refuse?" he asked, almost conversationally. "We will take your world anyway," she said, without malice. "We will cut every road you walk and not a single road your citizens use. We will leave your soldiers very hungry and very aware of their children's safety. We will surround your capital not with ships, though we have them, but with options that remove your appetite. We will make you make a choice that looks like surrender, even if your mouth calls it something else. You think that you can—" "You came here," she said, gently. "Here, of all places you could defend, you came to the nursery. Not your throne, not your spires. Here. And you came fast, faster than you go anywhere. I think you've already chosen what you value. We're just letting you see it." He stared at her as if hate alone could burn holes. He tried to recall the speeches he had built of bone and ash and good choreography. None fit now. The brood hummed behind them. His bodyguard shifted. One of them, a giant with a scar like a canyon, looked sideways at a brood tank the way a man looks at the ocean. "Soft soldiers," he said, rough, ragged, "and yet you take my world." "By deciding not to destroy what you cannot replace," she said. He walked past her. Her squad tensed and then eased when she lifted her hand. He pressed his claw to a brood tank. Inside, larvae drifted in warmth like seeds in sap. He could not imagine the galaxy without that shape. He had never tried. "You will make us weak," he said. "No," she said. "We will make it possible for you to be strong long enough to consider why you need to be. That's different." "Those are soft words." "They're the only kind that hold when things fall apart. You learn that when your cities flood, or your rockets fail, or your children get sick. We learned it 1,000 times on our own world before we ever saw the stars." He turned. He looked at the medic. He looked at the Vol with their hands visible. He looked at the soldier with her scar like a comet. He looked at the places in himself that had grown around hunger, like callus around a wound. "What will you do with me?" he asked. "We'll try you," she said. "We will listen to every voice that wishes to speak of you. We will not let them cut your throat in a public square, because that is not how we end things. We will build a place where your people can speak without fearing your guards. We will let you see them doing that. We will give you a chair." "A chair," he repeated, incredulous and dry. "A hard one," she said, and the corner of her mouth lifted. The warlord felt the strangest thing then, a little flutter under his sternum, as if something accustomed to being held tight had loosened. He could have lunged, he could have called for the choir to silence. Instead, he lifted his hand. "Screz," he said. His bodyguard straightened. "Stand down. Tell the choir to keep singing." Screz's pupils flared. "My lord, do as I say." He waited. He let the silence settle again. The lyrics of choice were new in his mouth. He felt every watching eye as a weight and as a release. He looked again at the human. "Take my world," he said, "if you can take it without breaking it." She inclined her head as though she'd handed her a delicate tool. "We can." They did not broadcast a surrender ceremony to the galaxy. They did not make a parade of humiliation. They did not write a name for the day on a plaque that could be toppled when the next warlord rose. They moved through the levels of Khar-Vel as if they belonged there, not as kings, but as custodians. The evac lanes became boulevards. The shelters became clinics. The frequency choir invited human techs into their spires and argued with them like musicians do about chords. The Murs of Meridian taught the Threx chefs to salt soup. A Zune dance found new steps in a Threx marching ground, stubborn and beautiful. The human fleet stayed in orbit like a halo. It was a threat capable of fire. It was also a promise. You may sleep. In the first month, there were riots. Humanity did not make a myth of ease. They did not pretend that choice was a door that swung open and stayed ajar. Threx soldiers fought among themselves about what honor meant. Someone set fire to a clinic, and human firefighters and Threx hive tenders ran shoulder to shoulder with sloshing buckets. Admiral Cade walked the perimeter of the citadel one dawn, hands folded behind her back, listening to the sound of a city deciding things. A local news feed played on the wall, a small picture-in-picture grid of faces. A Meridian woman spoke passionately about the new pooling system for food. A Threx worker argued that the old ways had made them fierce, and the new ways made them something he didn't yet have a word for. A Zune elder corrected a rumor with elegant patience. Being heard turned their voices into tools instead of weapons. Cade's aide fell into step beside her. "You realize this is insane. We can't keep this up on every world." "We don't have to," Cade said. "We have to do it here, and here, and here." She tapped 3 places on the wall, then shrugged. "Softness scales when you teach strength how to hold it." "You're going to put that on a poster?" "I'm going to make sure we mean it," she said. Down below, in a classroom carved from what had once been a weapons locker, Nia stood before a group of Threx adolescents with a piece of chalk. The board was an old door turned on its side. "This is a bridge," she said, and drew a simple curve. "It looks soft, it bears weight. Soft, arranged the right way, can take armies across rivers." A hand rose. The boy from the storm, jaw rings a paler shade now, eyes curious. "What weighs more, 1,000 spears or one promise?" Nia looked at him for a long breath. "A promise that's kept, because you can lean on it tomorrow." He nodded like that made sense, just enough sense to walk out of the room without breaking the world. Up in the citadel's heart, the warlord sat in a hard chair and listened to testimony. He didn't always look up. He didn't always like what he heard. He learned the names of families he had never noticed. He learned the glare of a Meridian mother could crack him faster than a hammer. He learned that he could survive something other than victory. Screz stood beside him, eyes like chips of black glass. "You made us small," the general said once, after a long day of listening.
"I made us interesting," the warlord said. "I am not sure which is harder." "What are we now, then?" "I do not know," the warlord admitted, tasting the words again like strange fruit. "Ask me tomorrow." The galaxy watched Khar-Vel through 100 quiet lenses. Empires that had weighed humans and found them soft adjusted their scales. Pirates recalibrated their appetites. On worlds where the Terran Union flag raised on a mast, it was accompanied by an unarmed ship full of engineers and another full of translators and another full of midwives. On worlds where that flag had never been seen, a rumor spread. The humans took a warlord's world, and the planet kept its children. In a low-lit mess hall aboard the TUS Asterion, Nia Rozek sat with her team. They ate stew that tasted briefly of Meridian salt. They touched cups in the light way of people who intend to live. Sato asked Hernandez when he would stitch that patch onto a jacket. Kadir fell asleep with his chin in his hand, finally, from good exhaustion. Admiral Cade stopped by their table. She didn't make a speech. She took a spoon and a bite and nodded to herself and moved on. Soft rituals, hard held. On Khar-Vel's surface, the choir sang a new harmony at dusk, and the same melody supported it as during the storm. It was a strange thing, an enemy note borrowed, a promise kept in a key no one expected. The warlord lay awake that night in a bed that was too soft. He listened to the city under his window. He thought of how easy it had been to hold power when every conversation ended in a scream. He wondered if he was brave enough for this other kind of strength. He thought of a soldier with a scar and open hands, and he felt something in his chest shift like a planet finding a new orbit. The galaxy would not forget this, he knew. Neither would he. He rose, went to the nursery, stood in the doorway until a hive tender saw him and did not flinch. "Keep it warm," he said. "Always," the hive tender replied, and it felt like more than an answer. And on ships drifting like lanterns above, and in towers crusted with old salt and new paint below, and in alleys where children chased each other under the watchful eyes of both Threx and Meridian elders, something large and human kept moving beneath everything. It fed not on fear, but on a stubborn hope known first on a blue world and carried into the dark with rough hands and careful voices. In the schools of a world renamed, a teacher would later ask, "How did the humans take Khar-Vel?"
and 100 small voices would answer. They took it by refusing to let it be broken. Years from that first storm, Nia would walk a street where children played a game with chalk and pebbles and frequency songs. She would hear the choir's evening hum and think of the day she stood still in a room full of larvae and chose not to flinch. "Let me do more good than harm," she would still whisper sometimes, not because she doubted, but because softness worked best when tended like a fire. And in a quiet chamber with a hard chair, a former warlord would raise his hand when a Meridian woman asked, "Who here is willing to listen?" His claw would not shake when it rose. His voice would not be smooth, but it would be a beginning. He would say, "I am," and for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human.